Okay, Melissa, here's my question for you.
All right.
And then you got to ask it to me. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
When you think of a creative or a creator, what are the words or the images that come to mind?
Well, I see my daughter. Like if I think of a creative, it is my daughter. Let's see. If you have not seen her before, her hair could be orange, pink, green. She has a lot of tattoos. She tattoos
That she's done
herself.
many of her. Yeah. Oh.
Well, that's another story. Yep. But she's an artist in that she draws, she tattoos herself. She has nose piercing. She's unique looking, I would say.
Totally.
Uniquely dresses. Her car, before she wrecked it, was just an expression of herself, meaning there was grass, like the fake turf grass on her dashboard. There was stuff glued to it. There's stuff hanging down from the ceiling. I could not stand to be, I felt like I was being smothered by her art. That's how I would say, like someone who everything that they do is a work of art and creation. Oh. That is my daughter.
Well, and your house has been like that since I've known you.
There's still tape stuck to the ceilings because she has this thing of like creating butterflies or whatever and sticking things where they dangle down from the ceiling.
That is smothery. So I would say this, my spaces, if we're going to say that an element of creativity can be observed by the spaces.
Eyeballs,
creatives.
yeah.
Yep. My space would be, oh, she's trying so hard to be creative and interesting, but it's not there.
Yeah.
How would you describe your spaces?
Very plain until I got my daughter to help me do our living room, but it still doesn't feel quite right. Like it's still not me, because if it were me, it would just be blank.
Yeah. Mine would be bohemian.
Really?
Yes.
What does that mean to
like
you?
Live plants that I could keep alive. And like the braided, what's that word for like the braided, like the white
yarn?
Yeah, but there's like, it's not crochet, but macrame-ish, you know what I mean? And simple, but there's little vibrancy and it has a flavor. That's my dream, but I'm not creative. I just reproduce in that way, in spaces and in aesthetic. I reproduce what I see on
Other people
Pinterest.
do. Yeah.
Yep.
Now I remember Erwin McManus started this like everyone's a creative, which feels like when people are like when the athletes are like everybody's an athlete. I'm like, shut up. No, I'm not an athlete.
Right.
Like no, not everybody can be an athlete. Not everybody can be creative, at least in the way that we define creative. But Erwin McManus went through this thing, and my nephew Tim went to Catalyst and heard him speak or something. And Tim is a type of a creative. And he would say to me, like, Melissa, no, you are creative. Like, you built a business. That's creativity. You've created it. I'm like, I'm not buying it. The same way if people are like, no, you really are an athlete, Melissa. It's like, oh, come on. No, I'm not. I mean, am I alive? Am I breathing? Can I walk? Yes. If we want to call that athleticism, I guess we can, but I'm not. But I will say in the last couple of years, I actually will say, yeah, I'm a creative.
Last fall, we talked a lot about the creative process with Bible Lab. You want to talk about what was it that you were and are creating, to give a context?
For Bible Lab? Okay, so Bible Lab is a small circle of women right at this moment who are learning how to learn together. And can you pull up that quote by Jordan Peterson? That art is exploration, and artists train people to see. So here's how I see that within Bible Lab. I see us as artists, like in a circle, exploring and discovering who God is through his word, learning how to learn together, putting a process on it. There's a bit of creativity that comes into trying to put a process on it, but also not having a process that smothers the creativity. That's what we're doing. That's what Bible Lab is. It's learning together with the Bible and taking the unique components that each person brings. Andy will say this, we, meaning like the people in the circle, are the lab. The different gifts that we bring, the different perspectives, our life experiences, we bring to the table. And once these things mix together, it is a unique learning experience.
So I've noticed something that happens for your creative process and mine.
Okay.
This very subtle, it feels like a pesky, subtle thought will start circulating in the back of our brain. And it sometimes
feels embarrassing and stupid.
Yeah. And it actually probably flies around there for weeks and then months until there's courage to express what the pesky thought is. It's like this very vague idea that's uncomfortable to share because you feel like exposing it. You don't know what you're talking about yet. You don't know what you mean. There's not a
There's not a
clarity.
plan. Yeah.
No, there's no plan. There's no clarity. It's just an idea, but it kind of feels, I know this is so lame, like giving birth, letting the thing come from inward to outward.
And it has to grow. And there is this internal, just like with giving birth to a child, there's 9 months of incubation where it just has to grow. Can you, since we were talking about Bible Lab, can you articulate what that sounded like for me 2.5 years ago when I started to talk about with my red face?
Yeah.
Anytime I would talk about it, my face would be beet red because it was so vulnerable. What did it sound like?
Well, I know how it happened. Every few weeks, you would bring it up again. And you would say this, you always say this, I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's probably nothing, but I just have to get it out. So I've learned over the years of creation with you to perk my ears up and to let it, just to ask questions in a way that's not expecting clarity, because there is no clarity. So you would start saying, I think I'm supposed to do a Bible study, but it's not a Bible study. And I'm like,
super helpful.
Right, exactly. I'm like, okay, so can you unpack that? And you're like, no. And you would just repeat that over, and I would say, but what's different? And I would start
to say, we're learning together. And you'd be like, okay, what's different?
Yeah. I didn't understand what you meant until I started to see it. And I think that's a real frustration, that anything that you want to speak of where you see, but we don't see it.
I have just in the last several weeks have felt really frustrated. This does not go out to anybody else, but I can tell as I'm talking to Bible Labbers, some who have been in it the whole 2 years and some who are newer, but I'll be trying to explain this or hearing their feedback back and hearing your feedback back. And I'm like, does anybody understand what I'm talking about? Because we've gone 2 years and I feel like what I'm hearing back is not what I'm meaning or seeing. But when we sat here last week and we had a whiteboard and we talked about group learning, what is group learning and what is not group learning, or what enhances group learning and what distracts from group learning, I'm like, everything that they were saying, I'm like, yes, we are getting it. We are understanding the culture of what it takes to be a group that learns together. So there was sometimes I think my expectations are far too high for people to articulate back to me exactly what I see.
So you're talking about the frustration, and boy, have I seen it in you, where you say, I know what I'm trying to say. I can't find the words to say it. And so you'll say regularly, I'm just repeating the same thing. I'm just repeating the same thing, hoping that Andy, will
Or it's finally going to get it. Yes.
Right. Or that Bible Labbers, that we're finally going to get it. And so what is the lesson?
So when we were here last week, Heidi had turned to me and she said, Melissa, you're really good at when somebody else is speaking, you'll say, can you say that a different way? And as she said that, I'm like, yeah, but I don't do that. I'll say, Andy, can you say more? Or can you say that a different way? But I don't do that. Like I'm trying to myself to articulate back out because it's so painful. Here's the angst that I am in particular. The worst thing as a child for me to be able to do would be to express myself. Now as a adult, my creative process, the whole thing is expressing myself. And it is a painful process. It is not intuitive. It is not natural in a sense, meaning I'm going against the grain of my own wiring because I believe in what we do so much that I'm willing to go against the grain of my own wiring. And there's something really satisfying in it, but it's also extremely difficult. I think after hearing Heidi say that, I'm like, yeah, that is my wanting people to communicate in a way that I can understand them. I have to be willing to do that back out, meaning to take the time to say it a different way, to think about it in a different way, to really hear what other people are saying, to figure out where the disconnect is and to try to fill in the blank. That is so much work. I can feel tired by it and frustrated by it, which is not fair to anybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm right in it with you is when what you're experiencing is not yet the vision.
Yeah.
It's not the point yet. It's getting there and it's figuring out what is the gap and how do you articulate that and articulate it and being willing to see it's not them. That's what I've seen in you that feels different. Now, I never thought that previously, meaning you weren't blaming the group or me or us, but you would get frustrated and it would shut you down.
Yes, I would shut down. Mm-hmm.
This time I'm seeing your personal frustration, not at the group, but also the recognition that feels like it's got momentum to it, to recognize the gap and figure out really how to bring us along in a way that we don't feel responsible for the gap.
So can we pause here? We're talking about communication and we're talking about creativity. This can, we're talking about something called Bible Lab, but this conversation probably for you, maybe on the other side of this mic or this lens, could be a vision you see for your family or a vision you have for at work that you can't articulate. That's frustrating. So anyway, I'm hoping you're able to apply it.
Or talking to your kid's teacher.
Oh, yes.
Or talking to your doctor when they don't understand
what you're saying.
Yeah. It's a very delicate place that makes us want to just throw our hands up and be like, well, forget it.
Especially when it's vulnerable places of things that we deeply care about, whether it's our kids or our health or our job or our ministry. These are deeply personal and tender spaces that for me, because there's like a 6-year-old inside of me that will just be like, clamp up, shut up and forget it then,
So let's talk about vulnerability with creation. And remember, like when I was a teacher, not with the students that I taught, but with my fellow colleagues, I felt the vulnerability of creating something that we were going to do, creating an in-service, creating ideas that we would come. So really it can sound like very much, well, I'm not a Bible teacher, so I don't experience that. I think whenever we're leaning toward bringing something new, interesting, different to anybody, that's what we're talking about. I think there's so many self-defeating thoughts when you're raising your hand to say, I have an idea. For example, people are going to say, yeah, like discredit me from the beginning. Who's going to come to this thing? How embarrassing my failure is going to be, so don't even get started.
Yeah.
Other ones for me personally are, so I've created an environment, a space with women's leaders in our region. It's simple. I mean, it's ultra simple. Just lunch once a month for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And my fear is, 1, nobody's going to show up. 2, I'm not going to be able to be gifted enough to be interesting enough to attend for. Yeah. Do you hear the lie there? Yeah. Everybody's gathering to be next to Andy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can be the thing of way inserting myself as the reason or the connection point when that's not true.
What is true? So state the truth.
We want to be together because we all love God.
And we want to experience Him.
Yeah. No, that has very little to do with me personally. And
why do we feel that pressure though, as the creator or the gatherer or the whatever you want to call it?
Well, it feels like the chips fall, and they do, on me. And it feels like,
well, let's parse that out. Can we parse that out? Where does the real responsibility for this instance lay on you for Wednesdays, our gathering, and where does it not? Can you parse those out?
Maybe. So it feels like I'm supposed to do it. So there's an obedience factor with that I am responsible for. It feels like even administrating the logistics to gather women, that falls on me. So if in my mind it goes badly and people show up, they get the wrong information, they don't want to be there, that feels then, because I'm the initiator, like a reflection of
on
me.
You. Because the invitation is coming from you.
Yep.
And I wonder if there's a third thing as far as responsibility, and it's the one that maybe is sloughed off the quickest, although I'm not sure by you because I know you, but that is the prayer, the listening to the Holy Spirit, not to make it good, but to ask Him to come.
Yeah. That for me is the prep work.
Yeah.
It's how I'm wired, and it comes as a conviction to me. Is I will say to myself regularly, to others moderately. For me, my leadership is through prayer, and prayer comes because of leadership. Like it feels like a cycle to me. So what about you? Like those are the vulnerable thoughts that I could have in the creation process of initiating. Does that ring anything for you?
I mean, yes, it feels very vulnerable. My stupid face turns so red. Even when I was talking to Andy about Bible Lab, before she had stepped into Bible Lab, so this would be like 6 months after it started, anytime I talked about it, you actually took a picture, maybe I'll pop it up here on the screen on YouTube, but you took a picture one day of me talking about, just like you got out your camera and you snapped it, and I'm like, what are you doing? And you're like, nothing. And then you sent me the picture. I mean, my face was just bright red, and I was just talking about Bible Lab to Andy. Like, I tell you all the things. Mm-hmm. My face does not get red almost ever. Because I think there is, when you feel God has given you something and you feel so inadequate, which I do, to actually see it to fruition, it's weird because it's like you feel it so deeply and you think you're doing what God is asking you to do. And you also know that there's no way you can do it in and of yourself. It's a very vulnerable, to me, feeling.
So if you were talking to a woman who was like, oh my goodness, I think I'm supposed to XYZ. And she's like, how have you done it? What have you learned? And what should I do or not do?
So the first thing I would say is today, if you are listening to us and your heart's beating a little bit faster, you're like, there's that thing again that just keeps coming to my mind that I keep trying to like, be like, no, God, I can't do that. I can't do that. Go get Seth Godin's book, The Practice. And basically what he talks about is creativity is not a talent. Creativity is a practice. And I would say the more we practice, now Seth Godin doesn't say this, I'm going to insert this. The more we practice with the Spirit to learn how to do this creative process, the more practice we get, the more we're able to give out to other people. And Jordan Peterson had said, art is training people to see. And basically, I think what he means is art is training people to see what you see. And the Holy Spirit has given me, the Holy Spirit has given Andy, the Holy Spirit has given you a very particular way to see God, to see the gospel, to see mercy, to see the world in a very unique and special way. And art, or any form of creation, is just helping people see the way that you see God, which is completely unique. And it takes a lot of practice, small practice over and over and over. Reminds me of learning how to, and I see you learning how to as well, within the process of creating, to actually have fun and to be with God and to be with either here or with a circle of people, and how much more life that gives when we're not stuck on the product or the result of whatever the creation is, and just the experience of creating. We're starting to see the edges. Like, I've been praying about this for a year now, of like, really like, Lord, show me not to get caught up in the numbers on YouTube, whether they're good or they're bad, and they're mostly bad, but not to get caught up in that, and just to fully embrace the joy of creating. And I'm starting to see just a little bit of fruit with that, of feeling actual joy. If you have made it to the end of this video, congratulations, we really are friends. And if you've stuck around this long, I really think you'll like this video. I take you through a day in the life of creating a Bible study for women, a little bit more of the on-the-ground practicals of creating. See you next week.